European Parliament from Britain are just clones of all the other politicians that they said the Green Party was there to challenge. It's a new politics. No, it's not. And again, you know, they've been pulled in by the system, vibrated into line. They are articulating this nonsense about human-caused global warming, or they call it now climate change because temperatures have been falling. And they're being played like, again, appropriately, a violin by the system. And these were people that said they were had come to change politics. Well, no. Politics has changed them, as it does with everybody virtually.
And then you have another issue here. I just want to read you a quote quickly here, which is kind of interesting in regards to what kind of people also might be attracted to the European Union and becoming an MEP, because they write in the same book I mentioned before that usually being an MEP gives immunity from prosecution unless your college vote to suspend your immunity, which rarely happens. But they said that in several EU countries, rich fraudsters feeling the hot breath of the forces of law and order on their backs of their necks have quickly bought themselves seats as MEPs by making large contributions to local political parties. Thus, as long as they maintain their lucrative but legal Brussels jobs, they could stick two fingers up at the police and at those they had defrauded. In many cases, by the time they eventually left the European Parliament, local statutes and limitations meant that they could no longer be prosecuted for the crimes they perpetrated before hurriedly decamping to the well-paid safety of Brussels. What do you think about that, David?
Well, I mean, that's typical. I mean, what we're looking at is an fast evolving global system in which people are being taxed more and more, controlled more and more, have more and more laws imposed on the fine detail of their lives. I mean, you know, the government here is now saying it's going to introduce cameras compulsorily in people's houses who they say are not looking after their children properly, so they can be watched 24/7 to make sure that this happens to the children, that happens to the children. These are Orwell's telescreens. I mean, this is how far we've gone now.
Yeah.
And so that's happening on the side of the mass of the people. That's what we're being subjected to. But the system is also evolving to give more and more money, more and more immunity from the laws that they're passing for themselves to be imposed on other people. And it's creating this upper class, this elite class. People call it the political class. It's more than that because it goes into other areas. But this elite class of people who are making law for the rest of the people, but not being subjected to it themselves. And there's more and more of these kind of get-outs that you're talking about here.
Yeah.
I've just looking at a story on my website now, which was posted today. It's just a little bit from it. It's just an extraordinary story. It's about the European Parliament and the expenses. It says here, MEPs can claim a subsistence allowance of about £270 a day, tax-free, for every day they turn up to work.
Yeah.
This gives them another £43,000 a year tax-free. Again, no receipts needed. MEPs, wait for this, call this the SO or the so-so allowance, the sign-on, sod-off allowance, because all they have to do to get it is to sign in. It's like someone, you know, going to the school, the register's taken, they get 270 quid and go home.
Yeah.
They're £80 a night for hotels. £190 a day they get for allowance for lunch and dinner, or what's left from the allowance that they get for overall things. They are generously subsidized restaurants in the parliament with political parties, and around 15,000 lobbyists hosting endless champagne-fueled dinner events. Most MEPs would struggle to use much of this money, making it relatively easy to pocket at least another 20,000 or more a year tax-free. Once you add in the thousands more, it says, to be made from travel expenses and the money MEPs receive for themselves and their assistants when they complete their time in the Parliament, most MEPs can live like royalty at our expense and still walk away with around £1 million in their bank accounts off just one 5-year term. So that is just a little glimpse at the scale of corruption and bribery that's going on. And again, all the bureaucrats want is to be left alone to do what they want, which is to create a fascist, well, I say create, they've already created it. Yeah. It's just how deeply we go into it, a centralized fascist state in Europe.
That's right. And also I want to mention that once they actually leave office, MEPs can continue to enjoy what they call a transitional allowance. So basically it's their parliamentary salary for another 6 months to 2 years. Did you know that?
Yes, I did. And we had a controversy over here because we have well, you know, if there was an award or a cup for the most corrupt, the most pig trough politician that I've come across, it's a man called Peter Mandelson.
Right,
this man could be corrupt for the world. I mean, he could represent this planet at corruption. And he is now running Britain. I mean, he was a European commissioner and made an absolute fortune. I think he was a trade commissioner. And then when he was invited back to join Brown's government, then it came out about the transitional payments he was going to get from Brussels even after he left, which were ridiculously high. And he was appointed to the House of Lords, which means he doesn't have to be elected. And now he is the most powerful man in the government. And Mandelson is a blatant agent of the Rothschild family. He's very close to them. So, and he's also the man behind Tony Blair. So you see the same characters keep coming up everywhere. And for people who don't know this guy, Peter Mandelson, in other parts of Europe, watch him like a hawk, because this man is a real agent. A real worker on behalf of the agenda on the inside and the outside. And he is very much being connected to the European Union, as someone like him would be in the way things are going. And he's come out recently and said Britain should join the euro because that's the whole agenda. So anything that comes out of Mandelson's mouth in Britain or anywhere else is the agenda, and it's overwhelmingly the European Union agenda because he is so close to that organization.
Just incredible. And don't know if you've heard about the report that details a little bit of this. It's called the Galvin report. I think his name was Robert Galvin. Have you heard about that, David?
I don't know. Fill me in.
Well, basically it was an internal kind of audit service that found some of this evidence on how much corruption goes on within the EU and how much money the MEPs are getting. And basically this was prevented from leaking at first, and eventually it actually is available now on WikiLeaks. I can put up a link to this on in relation to this interview so people can check it out for themselves, because it's a really, really important report that goes into some of these issues. But one thing I want to mention to you, David, as well, in regards to this, is that apparently, David Craig and Matthew Elliott write in this book that documents that are given to MEPs are actually watermarked, and they're actually changed a little bit in their structure, which means that MEPs are frightened to release the reports, because that means that they can track back to who it was who leaked the documents. So it's a really, really interesting situation that they're doing lockdown within the structure of the EU itself and trying to prevent anything from reaching out to the public, you know?
It's a tyranny. And the more that you centralize power, the more power you have to centralize even quicker. And so this European Union tyranny is moving forward faster and faster. The more it centralizes power, the more power it has to move the centralization on even faster. And, you know, there's dissidents from the former Soviet Union who've come to Britain and quite rightly pointed out that the structure of the European Union is just like the old Soviet Union with the Politburo and all this stuff. It's just a mirror of it. And, you know, people don't realize the scale of what's going on because they don't follow the news and the detail of the changes that go through in this legislation coming out of the European Union. which is very, I mean, you talked about Valéry Giscard d'Estaing earlier and what he said about changing the wording so people don't realize what it means. These